Mehdi Hassan says, hi, Kian and Lucas. Real Madrid took up a youth project with Vinicius Jr., Rodrygo, etc. that yielded practically nothing so far. They are offloading club legends to either sign Mbappe or for further financial stability for a project in the future, the goals of which are unclear and vague. Why is this club run on this sort of a brute force method and not a more sustainable system such as Bayern or even Atletico, who are far better run at the moment than us? I believe Florentino's arrogance and perhaps ignorance about the evolution of the game is the root cause. What do you guys think?
Well, the transfer policy for Madrid has produced mixed results, in my opinion. Because, for example, you got players who were a bargain, like Valverde, Asensio, even Odegaard, who definitely increased their value. Casemiro also for Real Madrid since they first signed for the club. But then obviously the big problem here were other players like Jovic, Vinicius, Rodrygo. Militao in the end ended up producing last season, but was also a risky move if you ask me. And even though obviously he ended up proving his worth last season, and it looks to we all expect him to be a starter next season. But I think the problem has been overpaying for young players like Vinicius Rodrygo and Reinier. I think those were three signings that were difficult to understand if Real Madrid were also pursuing or potentially thinking about signing Mbappe in the future, because in the end I think that Rodrygo and Vinicius are both comfortable on the left wing, which is also Mbappe's quite probably best position. So that transfer policy has produced mixed results, but definitely those three moves in particular were a bit hard to understand, and definitely I think Real Madrid are somewhat paying the price for them. And I think we also need to consider the stadium. I think that Real Madrid probably thought and expected that at least a part of the stadium was going to be funded by a sponsor, by a naming sponsor, and in the end this hasn't happened. Obviously COVID as well. So these two other elements have also played a factor in Real Madrid's economy, and that's why Real Madrid right now are not spending as much as they were accustomed to in the past, as other clubs like Bayern or Atletico are.
I think the stadium renovation, and I think there's a question about it, so I won't get into too much now, but I think that in itself is a really exciting outlook for the future once that's completed, because I think it actually allows you to, like, this financial situation isn't going to last forever, and the stadium is part of the reason why. But back to the question, is Florentino's arrogance or perhaps ignorance of the evolution of the game the root cause? I don't think he understands football and squad building in that way, but I think he thinks of big names and marketing and whether those players can help the team in a big picture way, which is fine. Anytime he signs more under the radar players, it's usually not him, right? It's based on the recommendation of the scout, etc., or the sporting director when we have one, or the manager, etc. With certain managers having more pull, like Ancelotti in a way doesn't have the pull that Mourinho and Zidane have, which is part of the reason why he's here too. But that's another story. But I thought it was interesting, Lucas, to talk about the idea of taking up a youth project with Vinicius and Rodrygo that yielded practically nothing so far. Given the amounts we spent on those two, they are good players, and not sure exactly where they'll be in 5 years. I think it's a decently optimistic outlook, especially for Rodrygo and maybe Vinicius if he can figure certain things out. But they need to make a leap. But I think there is an argument to be made. If you're going to splash that kind of money on unproven talent, why not go to the youth team instead? So is the trade-off to go with Arribas instead of, let's say, spending that money on Vinicius Rodrygo? What's the trade-off? Is there a cost-benefit analysis that we can calculate and say, well, Arribas is free. He came up to the youth team. He's fucking amazing. Can we...
Or even give those minutes to Kubo, who was cheaper also.
Brahim. I mean, well, Brahim we spent money
Brahim,
on, so
for sure.
that's but we have him
Yeah,
on the
well,
books,
but
you know.
Brahim was more proven than Rodrygo and Vinicius. I realized that he only played a handful of games for Manchester City, but he had already made his debut in an elite league in Europe. So he was he was half the cost of both Vinicius and Rodrygo, and was more proven than those two for sure. So I'm not sure that Brahim fits into the same category than Vinicius and Rodrygo here.
No, and I'm not necessarily saying that Kubo and Arribas will be better than Vinicius and Rodrygo. I think they have a chance to be. I think they have all the talent in the world. I think it's also possible they won't be. But my point is it really like worth the tens of millions you're going to spend on those two? If the hope is one of these become Neymar, then if that's the hope, then you're banking on a lot. Like it's a big risk. Neymar was pretty damn proven when Barcelona signed him. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
he was much further ahead than these two. So I'm just putting it out there. Like I have always liked when we've at least given the youth a chance, and I think we have a really, really good pool here right now with Castilla. It might be too late to have this discussion. Maybe this discussion happens 2 years ago instead of now, or 3 years ago, because you already signed those players, and some of the players we have, like Arribas, may not have the chance to break through. But, you know, I know Asensio has been disappointing the last couple of years, but he was basically free and a very low investment that it was, you know, if you think about the goals that Asensio scored in the finals and stuff,
yeah,
he's been worth the 3 million or whatever peanuts paid for him already. So I like the under the radar, like players like Arribas and the Fede Valverdes. So it's just a conversation I think worth having. Is it really worth spending money on all these kids that are unproven when you also have kids that are pretty damn good in your own system that you could at least give a shot to?
Right, correct. And you're optimistic about both Rodrygo and Vinicius, but right now I don't think you can sell either one of them for the same amount of money you spend on them.
No chance.
So right now it's a failure. I mean, maybe they improve, and people keep saying that they're still young and all, but you know, younger players than them are already performing for other big clubs in Europe. Maybe they figure it out later than these other players I'm talking about. But I mean, I'm not as optimistic as some people are with Vinicius and Rodrygo. I think football has changed a lot in the last few years, and when you're already 20 or 21, you should be ready to contribute already if you are going to be a big star. Maybe and considering the amount of money Real Madrid spent on them, I think they were banking on them to be big stars and not only decent and solid players, which they might actually be. They are already decent and solid players. So, but you know, that's not the kind of money Real Madrid were spending on them to be this good. I mean, they were hoping that these two players and also Reinier were going to be big stars in the future. And right now, my chances are that they will never be the top 3 or top 5 players in the world category, in my opinion.
So, can I ask you, do you think either Rodrygo or Vinicius will be as good as Neymar?
No way. Okay,
me neither. It was kind of a rhetorical question. We both know the answer is no. But
it's a solid no, a strong no. Like, no way.
I agree. I think Neymar is probably the best Brazilian player since Ronaldinho.
And I'm not a big fan of Neymar, by the way.
So
but, I mean, he's definitely a top 5, top 3 player in the world for sure. And Rodrygo and Vinicius should have already shown more than they have in order to be that kind of player. I mean, they are not even undisputed starters for Real Madrid right now. So the answer is definitely no. Yeah.
So the reason I ask is because I think the club really were banking on one of them to become him. And
yeah, I agree.
This goes back to the wounds of Florentino coming so close to signing Neymar and not being able to for a lot of reasons, and some of them corruption related with the way Barcelona snatched him. But there were wounds there, and he really wanted to find the next Neymar. So, given that he doesn't become that. They don't become that, which is pretty clear to me. At what point do we look at this and say, was it worth it? Because if Vinicius just becomes like a Pulisic or even a Brahim or a Rashford or a Sterling would be pretty solid, to be honest. But and Rodrygo becomes something like that as well. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just spitballing random players. I think that fit that profile, like a Mikel Oyarzabal. I think we can say, if that was their ceiling, then I would have rather just stuck with the players like Brahim and Kubo and Rodrygo and Brahim, and see what we would have had with that.
Yeah, I agree, because you've wasted a lot of money for them to not be a star and a big founding block of Real Madrid. And more importantly, this is a big problem I have with the two. Well, not with the two Rodrygo and Vinicius, but with Real Madrid's lack of vision, because they play the same position. How did they didn't realize this fact? I mean, obviously Rodrygo has had to play on the right wing because he didn't have room to play on the left. But it's so clear for everyone watching football that Rodrygo and Vinicius are both left wingers. So how come you spend 45 million euros on the same profile of player just a year apart? It's just nonsense to me, this lack of vision, and obviously they don't have anything to do with it, and it's not their fault. And now it's up to them both to earn their role in Real Madrid. And even I would say that the most problematic signing of the three is obviously Reinier, who seems to be lost in European football, and it will be tough for him. I realize he's still young, but it's not going to be easy for him to be relevant for Madrid in the next 2-3 seasons, and that's a problematic timeline considering the money spent. But I mean, the fact that Rodrygo and Vinicius play the same position, it speaks volumes about Real Madrid's quote-unquote lack of vision about in this transfer policy.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of like the debate within the NBA when you have a draft pick and you're like, should you draft for best fit or should you draft the best player available? And I think Real Madrid's approach to this was, let's forget about the positions they play, and we just try to stockpile the best players and then figure it out later. But the problem is, in the NBA, it's a lot easier to first of all, I guess you're investing like a year of losing into the player you draft. But in terms of like the financial side of things, it's a little bit easier to move a player you drafted that might not fit, or to move the player that the new draft pick kind of moved out. In this situation, like, you can't recoup what you invested in these two, I don't think. So
correct.
Yeah. So by the way, I still think Rodrygo is going to pan out. Not Neymar, but I think he's going to be...
At what level? Exactly.
I think he's going to be like... I think you can put him like at his ceiling. I'm saying if he pans out and hits his ceiling, I'm looking at like a Sterling, Rashford kind of player.
That would be a success for sure.
Yeah.
That would be a success. I mean, definitely 45 million euros. Both Rashford and Sterling would be more expensive than 45 million euros right now. So that would be a huge success, in my opinion.
Question from Jonathan Oliver. He says, hey guys, I hope you're doing well. Seeing how Fede and Odegaard both like to occupy some of the same areas, how do you think we can get the best out of both of them next season?